This video is a testament to how cooking with ingredients that you already have on hand, rather than following a recipe, can somehow lead to meals that you would have never even thought of. Today, we're making corn pasta. At least, that's what I've been calling it. I'm going to take you through the thought process of how I first made this dish a couple of weeks ago, and it's a bit chaotic. If you are interested in a more streamlined recipe with ingredient measurements, timings, and steps, please check the description below. So, I got home last Saturday from work. I didn't have much of anything in my fridge, but I did have about 5 cobs of corn that I had bought the Sunday before that were about to go bad. Without thinking about what I was going to end up making, I just got to work shucking and slicing the kernels off the cobs. Pro tip: typically you see people stand up the cob vertically and then slice down. The main issue with that is that the corn kernels will literally go everywhere. So, instead of holding it up vertically, hold it up horizontally. The first cut is a bit tough because you don't have a flat side to rest the cob on, so it can roll around. Make the cut slowly, and then once you do that, you will have a flat side to lay the cob on. Just do a couple of cuts around the cob, and you can see how the blast radius of the corn kernels is a lot smaller. It was about 3 cobs in that I started to think about what I was actually planning to make. Typically, I make some type of corn salsa, but I had already had a decent amount of Tex-Mex inspired food that week. What I hadn't had in a while was pasta, so the idea of somehow combining corn with pasta started going through my head. Regardless of what I was going to make, I knew I wanted to sauté the corn. So I got a pan heating while I finished cutting the rest of the corn kernels. Then when that pan was hot enough, I added some oil and started cooking down the corn. At this point, I decided I was going to commit to the pasta. I wasn't feeling any other inspiration, and I figured, how bad could it really be? So I got a pot of water boiling. This is one part of the recipe that will obviously be optimized in the written recipe I put in the description. You should clearly boil your water before you even start with the corn. But this is freestyling. All efficiency kind of goes out the window here. The next question I had to grapple with is, what kind of sauce am I going to make for my pasta? One thought I had was to make an olive oil based sauce. I would take some olive oil, heat it in the pan, then saute down some garlic, and then mix it together with some starchy pasta water to make an emulsified sauce. That probably would have been really tasty. Maybe I'll make that someday. But something else caught the corner of my eye. A mostly full container of cherry tomatoes. Cherry tomatoes offer a bit of acidity, which I thought would help to balance out the sweetness of the corn. It also had been a while since I made a tomato sauce with fresh cherry tomatoes, so I felt more compelled by that option and decided to go with that. Once the corn started to pick up a bit of color, I took it off the heat and scooted it into a bowl. And then back at the stove, I had some brown bits stuck to the bottom of my pan, so I just added some water to the pan to deglaze, and then scraped down those brown bits with my wooden spoon. There's a ton of flavor there we don't want to lose. I then added a bit more olive oil to the pan, and then I added all of my cherry tomatoes. The goal is to cook them down into a sauce. While that was going, I decided to chop up garlic because, well, why not? I diced 3 cloves worth of garlic and set that aside for later. Back at the sauce, the tomatoes were starting to break down, so I took a potato masher and started mashing the tomatoes down into more of a sauce consistency. The next decision I needed to make is, what type of pasta shape should I use? The first time I made this, I used some small shells, which turned out really nice because the corn kernels kind of tucked themselves into the shells. Ideally, I think I would use shells every time for this pasta, but tonight I didn't have shells on hand. I only had this cavatappi pasta on hand, this kind of spiral shape, so that's what I used. Depending on the pasta shape you use, your timing will be a bit different, but I usually just follow the lower end of the time listed on the box. For this cavatappi, that was only around 6 minutes. Because of this, I had to wait until the sauce was mostly broken down before I added the pasta to the water. For something like shells that takes a bit longer, you don't necessarily have to wait as long for your sauce to break down. Again, exact timings will be in the description. With about 5 minutes left on the timer, I added the chopped garlic to the tomatoes and gave it a stir. There's more than enough moisture in the pan to avoid burning the garlic, so I felt okay with that. When there was about 2 minutes left on the timer, I then added my cooked corn and stirred the sauce together. Then, about 2 minutes later, when my timer goes off, my pasta is ready and I will scoop it into my pan. I'll then go ahead and mix the pasta together just to incorporate all of the ingredients. This time I noticed the pasta is a bit dry, so I'm going to add a couple of ladlefuls of that pasta water. This will just loosen it up and make a nice emulsified sauce. I'll give it a couple of other stirs, and then I'm going to taste the pasta for seasoning. This time it tasted pretty good. If you taste and it feels a bit bland, you could add either some salt or some grated Parmigiano Reggiano. It's really up to you. To plate the pasta, I'll just take a wide-rimmed bowl and scoop a couple of ladlefuls of the pasta into that bowl. You could optionally garnish with basil or another fresh herb. I didn't have any herbs tonight, so I just decided to go with some fresh cracked black pepper. And that's the pasta. Let's go to a taste test. So I made this, I don't know, a couple weeks ago at this point, but I was just kind of throwing ingredients together. I didn't really know what I was doing. I thought of the idea of corn pasta. It didn't really seem like it made a lot of sense, but when I first made the dish, I was shocked at how good everything came together. I'm using, sweet summer corn, so it's obviously very sweet. I'm using cherry tomatoes. I mean, they're store-bought. I don't have the package, but they're store-bought, not farmer's market type of tomatoes, but they're still probably a bit fresher than they usually are at other times of the year, compared to end of summer. So I'm using two very peak crops, peak summer types of vegetables here. And, the corn's sweet, the cherry tomatoes are sweet, but the cherry tomatoes are also a bit acidic. And overall, it just has a very fresh taste to this pasta, and it just really works. Yeah, it's really good. Last time I made it, I had shells. I think the shell shape works better. Um, the shells. I mean, I'll put up a little clip with the corn kernels tucked into the shells, but you don't really get that with this spiral shape. So if I were to do it again, I'd probably try to have shells on hand. I didn't have shells on hand tonight, and I wasn't going to go out to the store to buy it, so I just used what I had, and it still tastes delicious. But I definitely think the shells make it an even better eating experience. But overall, it's delicious. Like I said, what I showed you here was a very inefficient version of the recipe. I'm just trying to capture, the chaos that was me first throwing this together. But I'll have a more efficient, more optimized recipe down in the description with measurements and all that. But yeah, I hope you try this out. Thank you.